What's up, guys? Anders Holmes here with another mini solo film review. This episode, I will be looking at the Christian Bale film American Psycho, directed by Mary Harron. The film follows the life of Patrick Bateman. Patrick works on Wall Street, lives a high-class lifestyle, owns a wonderful apartment in the American Gardens building on West 81st Street on the 11th floor, and is engaged to socialite Evelyn Williams. On the surface, Patrick appears to be like any other yuppie Wall Street broker from the 1980s, but hides a much darker and twisted psyche underneath. He is, in fact, a serial killer. Recently, I just finished reading the book for the first time. I had seen the film before a few times, but hadn't read the book. I had read other Bret Easton Ellis novels, and I have turned into quite a fan of his work, even if it's not for everybody, kind of like this film is. It really does have some extremely horrifying and graphic descriptions of violence. It's quite hard to read, and it just puts some really horrifying images in your head, and it's easy to see why this book was so difficult to put to screen in the first place. When reading the book, I have to say I was much more disturbed by this character than I was when watching the film. Like, it just really delves deep into this character's psyche, and it's quite terrifying, and it's very terrifying stuff, I have to say. Back in 1992, I believe, the rights were bought by Edward R. Pressman, who I believe had produced Scarface and Carlito's Way, directed by Brian De Palma, and both starring Al Pacino. Directors like Stuart Gordon and David Cronenberg were attached to the film at the time, including Bret Easton Ellis, who was hired to adapt the novel. So after a bunch of directors who were attached to the project, including David Cronenberg and I believe Oliver Stone, Mary Harron was picked to direct the film. Mary Harron co-wrote the screenplay with Guinevere Turner, who has a small role in the film, and Christian Bale was picked to play the lead of Patrick Bateman. I have to say, this is one of his best performances I have ever seen. He is truly magnificent as Patrick Bateman. I couldn't see anyone else playing this role. I kind of feel like if Christian Bale hadn't played Patrick Bateman, I don't think his career would have gone the way that it has now. I mean, this was a real big breakthrough for him. He became inspired by Tom Cruise when he saw him on Late Night with David Letterman. He was struck by Tom Cruise's energy and intense friendliness with nothing behind the eyes. When reading that quote, that perfectly sums up Patrick Bateman. Patrick Bateman is a narcissist. He's racist, homophobic. He craves materialistic things. He cares more about what's on the outside than what's on the inside. He's not empathetic at all towards others. He cares very little about anyone else but himself, which is pretty evident throughout the entire film, and you can kind of say that about all the other characters. Like, they live a pretty shallow lifestyle. Like, everyone in Patrick Bateman's world looks the same and cares about, what their business card looks like, or, wearing Valentino suits and looking good and all this other stuff, like where they're going to eat and, going to the same gym and getting a haircuts and all this sort of stuff. Like, it's quite shallow, and it's very satirical, which I'm going to get onto later in this episode. A lot of the praise should be given to Mary Harron's contained and subdued direction. She never goes over the top with the violence. She understands the source material and that the film's focus should not be on the violence, but as a satire on the culture of the 80s. The film is about yuppie culture, identity, and standing out in a shallow society. Patrick Bateman is very much detached from life itself and lives a lifestyle that is homogenized and superficial. Everyone, including himself, strives to live a very generic lifestyle that shows off the exterior and success and devoid of any real empathy. I feel like the only character in the film that we genuinely feel any sympathy for is Jean, who is Patrick Bateman's assistant, who is described in the book as someone who obviously has feelings for him. And Patrick even says, like, I don't think you should wear dresses like this. Wear something more fitting and attractive. And he even invites her around to his apartment and gives her a sorbet, and they have this conversation about who would they want in their life. I think that scene really works because it shows the struggle that Patrick has in having a normal life in the world that he lives in. I feel like he's so far gone from reality that, he can just be so detached from having a real relationship and something special with his secretary, who probably would be completely right for him. and he pushes her away, and it's quite sad to watch. And that scene nearly humanizes Patrick, and I think it's very important for the character's journey and where he goes towards the end of the movie. I first watched this film when I was in my teens, and the first time I watched it, I really didn't enjoy it. I was very disappointed in the outcome, and this is more towards the ending of the film and how ambiguous it was. I really went into the film blind. I had absolutely no idea what it was really about. I had this concept of, it's called American Psycho. It's about a serial killer in New York during the 80s. It's darkly humorous and all this stuff. But I had absolutely no idea it was going to be so, I don't know. It was just like I was just watching the movie for the first time, and I was just kind of like, wait, what's going on? And it just went nuts, and you're kind of feeling like Patrick, like you have no idea what's going on. It's like you're feeling quite anxious. You have absolutely no clear understanding of what exactly the film is trying to say in this moment. And for me, I was just struggling a little bit with it, and I was kind of, I don't know, I had a very sort of negative aspect towards it after that. But over the time as I've watched it, I've learned to appreciate that ending. As the film goes towards its conclusion, there is a debate whether Patrick Bateman committed these crimes or not. It was one of the things that never satisfied me enough the first time I watched it. Mary Harron has defended her interpretation and has said it's not a dream or hallucination. She wanted it to be ambiguous just like the book was. Bret Easton Ellis has said in an interview that American Psycho was a book I didn't think needed to be turned into a movie, as the medium of film demands answers, which would make the book infinitely less interesting. He said the book had attempted to add ambiguity to the events and to Bateman's reliability as a narrator. The film appeared to make them completely literal before confusing the issue at the very end. One thing that Mary Harron and Guinevere Turner should be noted for is actually bringing structure to Bret Easton Ellis' story. Bret Easton Ellis doesn't write like other authors do. He writes in a completely different way that would benefit to his stories. It's actually quite interesting, and I feel a lot of filmmakers, when they try to adapt his work, it sometimes never comes into place. Like some of the adaptations of his books have struggled or failed to capture that essence that was conveyed in his books. Like Less Than Zero with Robert Downey Jr., which was the adaptation of his first novel, is a clear example of that. The Rules of Attraction, which came out in 2002 and is directed by Roger Avary, is the only film that Bret Easton Ellis actually really likes. He said it was the only one that captured the sensibility of the novel in a cinematic way. I would kind of agree with that, but I'm not a huge fan of Rules of Attraction. I know it has this huge cult following after it, but there were a lot of aspects to it, and I had this when I read the book. Even though it's written in the same way like American Psycho, and you have all these very shallow and unsympathetic characters, there really wasn't anything interesting to it. It just leaves me very cold, and I've had that same feeling every time when I've watched it. Like Mary Harron and Guinevere Turner did adapt Bret Easton Ellis' work and put it on the screen, but they made it in their own way, and they made something that is superficial, but it's believable. There's another one of Bret Easton Ellis' books which hasn't been adapted yet. I think Roger Avary tried to adapt the book at some point, but I don't think that ever worked out. And I think Lunar Park is another one that people have tried to adapt. I think Benicio del Toro was attached at one point. I'm not too sure. I saw it on IMDb a few years ago. Glamorama basically does what American Psycho did for the 80s. It's very satirical of 90s culture, celebrity culture, and also consumerism. Not to diminish Glamorama's ability to be an interesting and intriguing film, I just don't think that it would be easy to put that film to the screen. It's a fantastic book. It's one of the most engaging books that Bret Easton Ellis has ever written, but I just don't think it would work. Sorry to say that. I mean, I know that there could be some people that would like to see that on the screen, but I mean, I would definitely shake the hand of the filmmaker who puts that book to the screen, much in the same way I would shake Zack Snyder's hand for bringing Watchmen to the screen after so many tries and so many directors who went through that project. So, I mean, that happened, so maybe Glamorama could happen, or Lunar Park, or even Imperial Bedrooms, which is a sequel to Less Than Zero, but have to be a very I don't know. I think with any of Bret Easton Ellis's work, you are going to come into some sort of struggle over how you're going to bring those stories to the screen, because they are, like I said, written in a particular way and are quite heavy stuff. I feel like it would put off some, viewers or readers for that matter. Like I mean, like I said, reading American Psycho, I was extremely close to putting down the book. I couldn't read it. Like, some of the descriptions of the violence that Patrick Bateman does towards these women, it is quite horrifying, and it goes on for many pages, and it's very graphic. Like, coming back to American Psycho, it's a very intriguing film. Yes, it's a very particular film, and I don't think it's for everyone, but it's very interesting. Like, reading the book and then watching the film afterwards, you do kind of come out with a greater appreciation of what was done in the book, and in some cases the film has breathed new life into the book for a new generation of readers. It's not for everyone. No, it isn't. It's definitely not for everyone. A lot of Bret Easton Ellis's works, like I've said, are not for everyone, but do check them out, because I do think he's a very interesting writer and think his books should be experienced. Well, thanks for watching another mini solo film review with me. I've been Anders Holmes. You can find me on Twitter at Fabricius91, FABRICIUS91. You can find the podcast that I do along with my brother Adam on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Podomatic, and TuneIn. I'll be posting the iTunes link below. Thank you very much for watching again. I've been Anders Holmes. Have a good one.